So today we begin chapter 4, qualitative behavior of solutions. Qualitative behavior of solutions of the differential equation y double prime plus pxy prime plus qxy equal to 0. Qualitative behavior means we will not solve the differential equation. Rather, with some mathematical arguments, we will test the behavior of the solutions. Let's begin with an example. See the differential equation y double prime plus y equal to 0. Suppose I don't know its solutions. What is given to me? There is a solution Sx of this equation satisfying two conditions. S0 is 0, S prime 0 is 1. Other solution is Cx satisfying two conditions C0 1 and C prime 0 0. This is given differential equation. Sx and Cx are solutions satisfying these conditions. Now, let's prove S prime x equal to Cx. Then C prime x equal to minus Sx. One more. S square x plus C square x equal to 1. Let's prove these three properties of these solutions one by one.
So how did we get those properties as x gives s0 is equals to 0 and s prime 0 is equals to 1?
These are given to you, okay? After that, this is the problem given to you. It is a problem given to you that you see, we know the solutions of this equation now, right? What are the solutions? Sin x and cos x, two linearly independent
Yes,
functions.
sir.
And you know sin x satisfies sin 0 0, sin prime means derivative of sin x at 0 is cos x, that is 1. Okay, so but suppose I don't know about sin x cos x. I don't know whether sin x cos x are its solutions. I'm not solving the differential equation. Now, it is given to you that Sx and Cx are solutions with these conditions through these properties. It's a problem. Okay, so let's prove these without knowing that these solutions are actually sin x and cos x. So let's prove the first one, that derivative of Sx is Cx. So how to prove it? First, S prime x is a solution. Is a solution of 1. Is it right? S prime is a solution. Is it right? S is a solution given to you. That means S double prime plus S equal to 0. So if you differentiate both sides again, you can write it like this. This means if I replace S by S prime, still it is a solution. So S prime is a solution. Now, what is S prime 0? S prime 0 is what? 1. And S double prime 0, you can find from here. S double prime 0 is equal to minus S0. And S0 is 0. So from these calculations, I can say that S prime is a solution satisfying these two conditions. S prime is a solution of 1 satisfying these two conditions. Now see, Cx is also a solution satisfying the same conditions. You know that this equation, this initial value problem, has a unique solution. S prime is a solution satisfying these conditions. S prime 0 is 1, S double prime 0 is 0. C is also a solution satisfying the conditions C 0, 1, C prime 0, 0. What does that mean? By uniqueness of solution, you must have S prime x equal to Cx. Do you recall that theorem? Y double prime plus Pxy prime plus Qxy equal to Rx. Y0, Yx0, you can take any constant. Yx0, K1, Y prime x0, K2. Px, Qx, Rx are continuous functions. This is initial value problem. Then this problem has a unique solution. C and S prime satisfy the same conditions and are solutions as well of 1. It means C must be equal to S prime. First part is proved. Similarly, can you prove C prime x is minus Sx? Yourself. C prime x is minus Sx. Second part. Minus C prime is a solution of 1. Is it right? C prime is because C is a solution, C prime is also a solution. Minus C prime is also a solution. Minus C prime is a solution. Now check these conditions. C prime 0 and minus C double prime 0. See what are the values. C prime 0 minus C prime 0 is 0. And minus C double prime 0 from here, because C is a solution. Minus C prime double prime 0 is what? C0, that is 1 from here. So minus C prime is a solution of 1 satisfying these conditions. Which conditions? At 0, minus C prime 0 is 0, minus C double prime 0 is 1. S is also a solution satisfying the same conditions. Again, by uniqueness of solution, you must have minus C prime x equal to Sx. Any doubt you can ask me. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Let's see the third part. Prove that S square x plus C square x is 1. Let's differentiate S square plus C square. We get 2S S prime plus 2C C prime. But what is S prime from here? S prime is C. We have already proved this part. S prime is C, C prime is minus S. S prime is C, C prime is minus S. So we get 0. It means S square plus C square is constant. This means S square plus C square is a constant. Say the constant is k. Now let's determine this constant. Let's put x equal to 0 on both sides. What do we get? S square 0. S0 is already given, that is 0. C0 means 1 equal to k. From this, what do we get? S square x plus c square x. Value of k is 1. So hence we have proved the third part also.
Can you please explain this again?
Yes?
Can you explain this again?
This part is clear. Derivative of this is 0.
Yes, sir.
After that, because its derivative is constant, so function derivative is 0, so the function is a constant. Now it is identity in x, so let's calculate. Let's put x equal to 0 on both sides. So S0 is 0, C0 is 1. So we get the value of k equal to 1. Put back the value of k equal to 1 here, hence you get the third part. Okay, likewise you can prove other properties of sine and cosine functions. So idea is that without solving the equation, this is a simple equation, you know the solution in advance, but suppose you have an equation which is not solvable exactly, then how to see the behavior of solutions without solving it? Okay,
So why are we saying here that if y is a solution, then y prime is also a solution of the equation?
it's very simple. It's true in general. You can see it here. If y is a solution, this is satisfied. Let's differentiate both sides. Can I write it like this?
Yes, sir.
Now, in place of y, you are saying y prime. It means y prime is also a solution of this equation. Okay? All right. Now, the properties like S of C plus 2 pi is SC, something like this you can prove. It means all properties of sine and cosine functions you can prove. And these solutions will be oscillating, isn't it? Because sine function goes like this. So in particular, we will focus on oscillatory behavior of the solution of the differential equation. Let's see a theorem. One important point, there are I think 4 to 5 theorems in this chapter. Proof is not there in the course. You need not to do the proof, but I will discuss the proof here because proof is very interesting. Okay, but you need not to prepare that for the examination. So first theorem is, let y1, y2 be two linearly independent solutions of the differential equation y double prime plus pxy prime plus qxy equal to 0. Then y1 vanishes exactly once between two zeros of y2 and vice versa. y1, y2 are two linearly independent solutions of this differential equation. Then we shall prove that y1 vanishes exactly once between two zeros of y2 and vice versa. Means zeros of y1 and y2 occur alternatively. Okay, let's see the proof. Suppose x1 and x2 are successive zeros of y2. means x1, x2 are two numbers where y2 vanishes. Okay. You know Wronskian of y1, y2 formula? Wronskian of y1, y2 is given by y1, y2 prime plus y2, y1 prime. No, minus y2, y1 prime. So let's calculate this Wronskian at x1. What do we get? y1 x1, y2 prime x1. Second part will not appear. Why? Because x1, x2 are zeros of y2, means y2 vanishes at x1 and x2. That's why y2 at x2 will make it 0. Similarly, calculate wx2, means the value of Wronskian at x2. You get y1 x2, y2 prime x2. Again, this part is 0 because y2 x2 is 0. Okay. Now, here is the mathematics, very interesting mathematics. You are saying that x1, x2 are successive zeros of y2. So graph of y2 goes like this. Let's say that there are two possibilities. Either it goes like this or like this. Let's consider the first one. If the graph of y2 goes like this is x-axis, okay? So what is y2 prime at x1? Can you tell me? y2 prime at x1. Is it positive or negative?
Positive.
Positive. And here negative, correct? If y2 prime is positive at x1, it is negative at x2. Means these two are of opposite sign. What can you say about Wronskian? You know Wronskian of independent solutions is always non-zero. And non-zero means either it always stays positive or always negative. Let's say it's always positive. These you have already tested, these are positive. These are of opposite sign. What can you say about these two now? Can I say that y1 x1 and y1 x2 are of opposite sign? Is it right?
Yes,
So
sir.
how can we say Wronskian is greater than 0 or less than 0 always?
So
Wronskian is always greater than 0 or less than 0.
No, I'm saying that you have already shown that these two are of opposite sign, correct? But Wronskian is of same sign always. So if these are of opposite sign, these must also be of opposite sign. If this is positive,
I'm asking why are Wronskian of the same sign? Why would we know?
Wronskian is non-zero. It's a constant thing, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
It will keep the same sign, it will not change. Okay. So what does it mean? y1 x1 and y1 x2 are of opposite sign. If these are of opposite sign, it means y1 is changing its sign between x1 and x2. What does it mean? y1 must have a 0 between x1 and x2. Now next point. Exactly once it vanishes, but it cannot vanish more than once. What happens if it vanishes more than once? Let's say y1 vanishes at x3 and x4 between x1 and x2. So using the same logic that we have proved a 0 of y1 between x1 and x2, we can prove that there is a 0 of y2 between x3 and x4, isn't it? If you say x3, x4 are two successive zeros of y1, then using the same logic, I can prove that there exists a 0 of y2 between x3 and x4. But this will contradict the fact that x1, x2 are successive zeros of y2. So there cannot be more than one zero of y1. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, proof is written in the lecture notes. You can read there also. Any doubt, you can ask me further. But if you are mathematically keen, you should look at the proof at least once. Okay, there are simple mathematical arguments to prove this. But this result is very important. If y1, y2 are any two solutions, y1 vanishes exactly once between any two zeros of y2 and vice versa, means zeros of y1 and y2 occur alternatively. After every zero of y1, there is a zero of y2 and vice versa. See one example. Already I've done one example, but say it again. You know its two linearly independent solutions are sin x and cos x. And you know the graph of sin x and cos x. This is graph of sin x. Vanishes at 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, like that. What about cos x? Graph of cos x goes like this. It vanishes at pi by 2, then 3 pi by 2, then 5 pi by 2, right? So you can see that between any two zeros of sin x, there is a zero of cos x and vice versa. See another example. Y double prime minus y equal to 0. What can you say about it? There are two independent solutions, y1 equal to e power x, y2 equal to e power minus x. Is there any zero of y1? Whether y1 vanishes somewhere?
No, sir.
No. So automatically the hypothesis of theorem is satisfied. Because there are no two zeros of y1, so there is no zero of y2 in between. Okay. So whenever zeros exist, this kind of situation will arise for independent solutions. So this result is clear with the examples.
Sir, should we consider the case where y2 prime x1 becomes 0 on x2 or s1 or x2?
No, it cannot be zero.
Can
You're
there be a
saying-
point of inflection and that goes up and then comes down?
No, that will not happen. There would be some other contradiction, okay? You can check that.
Alright, sir.
Now our focus would be on the oscillatory behavior of solutions. Okay. So in this regard, let's see what is normal form of a differential equation. Y double prime plus pxy prime plus qxy equal to 0. Qxy equal to 0. I want to change this equation in the format u double prime plus hxu equal to 0. Means first derivative is missing from it. How can I do that? Put y equal to uv. I will explain you why we want to finish first derivative from the given differential equation. Let's use this transformation y equal to uv, where u and v both functions of x. Let's substitute this value of y in the given differential equation and see what do we get. So before substituting, it's better you calculate y prime and y double prime here itself. Y prime is what? U prime v plus uv prime, and y double prime is u double prime v plus 2u prime v prime plus uv double prime. So this is multiplied by Q, yes, and this is multiplied by P, Py prime. Now just you have to add these three. So with this transformation, equation 1 becomes, let's write it as a second order differential equation in U. So it is Vu double prime. With U prime, what do you have? This term and this term. So PV plus 2V prime U prime, and with U you have QV. From this you have PV prime, and then V double prime. All these coefficients combined with the coefficient of U only. Yes, now you see it's a second order differential equation in U. I don't want first derivative here. So let's put PV plus 2V prime equal to 0. From this, what is V? E power integral minus half px dx. If I make it 0, that means I have to choose V equal to e power minus half px dx. Px is known from the given differential equation. So in this transformation, we know what is V. Okay. Now, using this value of V, what is the format of this equation? The equation that we have written here, U double prime, U prime. This is already 0. So V U prime plus this is 0. QV. What is the value of PV prime? You can write from here. What is the value of PV prime? V prime is minus half PV. So minus half P square V. Okay, it's a calculation only, you can do yourself. V double prime means you differentiate it. You can calculate V double prime from here itself. Differentiate it. So 2V double prime, you calculate it further. Okay, do it yourself. I will not do it. See what they get in that. Are you getting minus 1 by 4? After your calculations, you will get minus 1 by 4 P square V and minus 1 by 2 P prime V. Just check it. Now divide throughout by V. So U double prime plus Q minus half P square minus half P prime, U equal to 0. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is Hx in this form? Hx is this function, Q minus half P square minus 1 by 2 P prime. This form of this differential equation with this transformation y equal to uv, where v is this e power minus half integral px dx. This form of the differential equation is called normal form, where first derivative is not present. Now I explain you why first derivative is not required. See, y equal to uv prime, and v you have already found, u times e power minus of integral px dx. Solution of this equation is ux, and solution of this equation is yx. Do you think that ux and yx will have different zeros or same zeros?
Same zeros.
Same zero. The reason is that if ux vanishes, y also vanishes, because this factor is never zero. So because we are interested in qualitative behavior of the solutions through the zeros of the solutions, so for studying the solutions of this equation, converting to this equation is fine. You will see that there are two very important results for this form of the differential equation that we are going to do very soon. So that's why we convert this equation into this form. This is called normal form. Zeros of ux and yx would be same. Okay. Now there are two results on this normal form. Let's do them one by one. If hx is negative, then each non-trivial solution ux of u double prime plus hxu prime, hxu equal to 0, has at most 1 0. At most 1 0. Means simply by checking the sign of hx, we can say that how many zeros of ux would exist without solving the differential equation. So if hx is negative, then any non-trivial solution of this differential equation would have at most 1 0. Would have at most 1 0. Let's see its proof. Suppose, proof is interesting, just listen it once, you need not to do it later, okay? Suppose x naught is a 0 of ux. X naught is a 0 of ux. I will prove that there is no 0 of ux other than x naught. It means there can be at most 1 0. So x naught is a 0. I assume that u prime x naught is positive. Or first, let me argue that it is non-zero. What happens if this is also 0?
ux equal to 0, then ux becomes 0.
Yeah, in that case, u becomes a trivial solution, but it is given non-trivial, right? If the initial conditions give you 0, then u must be a trivial solution. But it is given in the statement that u is a non-trivial solution, so u prime x naught has to be non-zero. So let's say it's positive. Positive means what? At x naught, it's increasing function. X naught, it's increasing function. Is it right? We want to prove that there is no 0 to the right of x naught. Let's consider the right side first. Same argument we can apply to the left side. I claim that there is no 0 to the right of x naught. No 0 to the right of x naught. On the contrary, let's assume that there exists a 0. on the right of x naught. If there exists a 0, it means I should get some contradiction. Okay, if x1 is another 0 to the right of x naught, so its graph goes like this. Can you tell me what happens at this particular point? Say this point is x2. What
U
happens?
prime x is 0, but it should be greater
U
than
double. Can you tell me the sign of u double prime at x2? Positive,
Negative, sir.
Positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative, it's a point of maxima. You see, x naught is a 0, x1 in another 0. So at some point, the function finds its maximum, say at x2. So u double prime x2 should be negative. Now look at the given equation. U double prime at x2 should be equal to minus hx2 into ux2. U is clearly positive. You have assumed it. It is positive. Okay. hx2, it is given in the statement negative. Overall, what is the sign of u double prime x2 from here? Positive, because this is positive, this is negative, outside there is minus sign. So finally u double prime x2 is positive, but here you are saying it's negative. Contradiction. It means your assumption that x1 is a 0 of u on the right side of x naught is wrong. So there cannot exist a 0 to the right of x naught. Same argument can be applied to prove that there does not exist any 0 of ux to the left of x naught. So that's how this result is proved. Okay. As I said, proof is not important. If you are mathematically keen, you are interested in learning mathematical arguments, so it's good to do it. But remember this result. This is a differential equation in normal form. If hx is negative, then each non-trivial solution ux can have at most 1 0. Okay. Let's see another result. If hx is positive, and one more condition, integral 1 to infinity, hx dx is infinity. Hx is positive for all x positive, and integral 1 to infinity hx dx is infinity, then each non-trivial solution ux of this differential equation has infinitely many positive zeros. Positive zeros. This result is just opposite of the previous one. Previous one, you are saying that if hx is negative, then a non-trivial solution can have at most 1 0. But now you are saying if these two conditions are satisfied, then each non-trivial solution has infinitely many positive zeros. We will prove this result also by a contradiction. Assume that there are finite number of zeros.
So why we have taken x greater than 0?
It is given in the theorem statement. Okay, when we'll prove, you will understand. This condition is there in the statement. Statement is if these two conditions are satisfied, then each non-trivial solution has infinitely many positive zeros. Okay. So to prove this result, I'm making a contrary assumption that suppose ux has finite number of zeros. Finite number of zeros. Finite number of zeros means they are finishing somewhere. Assume that x naught is a number which is greater than 1 as well as greater than all the zeros. Let's say the last finite zero is, say, something x3. Okay, or you can say any number. Biggest zero, let's say biggest zero is k. I'm assuming a number x naught which is greater than 1 as well as greater than k. Okay. Now, to bring a contradiction, I will prove that there exists a zero of u to the right of x naught. Listen again how I'm beginning with. We have to prove that ux has infinitely many positive zeros if these two conditions are satisfied. Okay. I'm assuming it's opposite. Suppose ux has only finite number of zeros. Now I need to bring a contradiction with this assumption. So how to do that? I'm saying that suppose k is the largest zero, first of all, and x naught is a number which is greater than k as well as greater than 1. Up to this it is fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also assume that u is positive to the right of x naught, because you are we have to prove that there is no zero because it has finite number of zeros. So I can assume that, let's say u is positive to the right of x naught. Now construct a function g equal to minus u prime over u. Okay, what is g prime from it? Minus u double prime over u plus u prime over u whole square. What is u prime from here? U prime over u, hx. So I can write is minus is balanced. So hx plus u prime over u is already z. So I can write it g square x. Let's integrate both sides from x naught to x. If I integrate both sides from x naught to x, left side gives me gx minus gx naught, and right side gives integral hx dx plus g square x dx integral x naught to x, x naught to x. Now what can you say about the sign of gx? Depends on gx naught, this and this. About this I'm sure it is positive. This also I'm sure it is positive because hx is given as positive and x naught is greater than 1. Gx naught I don't know. It may be a very large negative number. If it is positive, then it's fine. But if it's negative, then it can be very large negative number, but no problem. I'm saying that 1 to infinity hx is infinity. I can make it very large so that overall sign of gx is positive. Because this integral can be made arbitrarily large for some x. So value of gx naught doesn't matter. Finally, I can say that gx is positive for sufficiently large values of x greater than x naught. Is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Any doubt you can ask me. I repeat again, I have constructed a function this, g prime is this, up to this there is no issue. Then I integrated both sides from x naught to x. This is also fine. Now I am saying that gx is positive for sufficiently large values of x greater than x naught. Why I am claiming it? Because this is positive squared function, hx is given in the statement positive, so it is also positive. Only issue remains with gx naught. It may be very large negative number, but no problem because integral of hx goes to infinity. I can choose x very large so that it becomes greater than gx naught in case gx naught is a negative number. Okay. So finally, I can claim that gx is positive for x greater than x naught, for sufficiently large x greater than x naught. Now, what is the meaning of g greater than 0? gx greater than 0 for x greater than x naught. Look here. U is already positive, you are saying here, and gx is positive here. What does it mean? U prime x should be negative for x greater than x naught. U is positive from here, G is positive from here. This expression tells you that U prime x should be negative for x greater than x naught. Okay. Now look at U double prime. You will see something interesting. U double prime from your given equation. U double prime x is minus hx ux. What can you say about its sign? Negative or positive? U is positive from here. Hx is given in the statement positive. So finally, what is its sign? Negative. For x greater than x naught. Now here you need to understand the mathematics. A function is there whose first derivative is negative for x greater than x naught. Second derivative is also negative for x greater than x naught. What can you say about such a function? What will happen to this function? U prime x negative means it's a decreasing function. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
And second derivative negative means it's concave down. It has to cross x-axis at some point. At some point. Second derivative negative implies concave down. First derivative negative means it's a decreasing function. So at some point it has to cross x-axis. Means u has a 0 to the right of x naught, a contradiction. Because initially you said there is no 0, there are finite number of zeros of u, and x naught is a number greater than all the zeros. So how can there exist a 0 to the right of x naught? It means your assumption is wrong. So what's correct? Ux has infinitely many positive zeros. Right? Remember that a decreasing function need not to cross x-axis. Second derivative must also be negative. Look at this function. Fx equal to 1 over x. Is it a decreasing function for x positive?
Yes, sir.
It's a decreasing function. Look at its graph, but it never crosses x-axis. Because it is concave up, it goes like this. Its second derivative is positive. First derivative is minus 1 over x square. Second derivative is 2 over x cube, that is positive. So point is that if first derivative negative, second derivative is also negative, function would take this kind of shape and it will cross x-axis. Okay, so hope you have enjoyed these proofs, these classical proofs. So main thing is that the results we have done, we will use in the problems. Okay.
So why do we use a normal form of the differential equation?
We are using normal form because in the normal form, zeros of the differential equation are same as if without normal form. I explained it earlier. We started with this differential equation. We changed it into the normal form, with which transformation? U times V means e power minus half p squared. Correct? With this transformation, this equation changes to u double prime plus hx u equal to 0, where hx can be written in terms of p cube. Okay? So, look at the relation between zeros of ux and yx. These are same because the value of x where u vanishes, y also vanishes. So zeros of y and u are same. Because we are looking for qualitative behavior of solutions, zeros of the solutions of the two differential equations are same. So it's fine if we use the normal form. Okay. We are interested in the oscillatory behavior of the solutions. So,
Any special use of this?
sorry.
What is the significance of this? Where would we use these equations?
Significance is that we will discuss in the next lecture. There is a differential equation x square y double prime plus xy prime plus x square minus say n square, n is a constant. This equation is not solvable by exact methods. Okay. It is a very important differential equation that appears in physics and other disciplines. Bessel differential equation. You will study it in detail in some later chapters. There is a special chapter where details of this differential equation are given.
So, but in the questions of the exercise of exact solution, some of the questions were the particular derivations of the Bessel differential equation. Like if we put n, if we give n a particular value, then we can solve them by the normal exact method.
No. That's. I understand what you're telling, but I'm telling you something else. Okay. There is no exact method for solving this differential equation. All right. So we get its solution in the form of power series. But using this qualitative behavior, we can study, means the theorems that we have done today, we can study the behavior of its solutions. You will see that we can prove that it has oscillatory behavior of solutions. Bessel differential equation is very important differential equation in physics, especially. It arrives naturally there. All right. So you will understand that. Don't worry about it. What is the significance of this qualitative behavior? Main thing is that you need to understand that what are these results at the moment. Okay. Any other doubt? Okay, so we will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m.